Of course, the probing question we ask you this morning is, do you think the government is being economical with the truth on the maize import? Do you think the government is being economical with the truth on the maize import? You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 is our SMS portal. We already have our panelists in studio to take us through what they think with this particular story of the maize puzzle. We have with us this morning Miguna Miguna, who is Nairobi gubernatorial candidate. We have also with us Senator Boni Khalwale from Kakamega. We have Joshua Kiptoo, who's a lawyer and also a tutorial fellow at the University of Nairobi. We have also with us Senator Kimani Wamatangi, who is a senator from Kiambu. This morning also received a message from Mutai Kagwe. He's feeling poorly. He cannot really join us, but we'll continue with the discussion nonetheless. Right, let's just drill deeper into wheat, and we talk about this particular maize puzzle. I want to hear from our panelists this morning, beginning with you, Boni Khalwale. What do you make out of all this conundrum that we are in with the maize?
I understand it only too well. What we are seeing is a replay of 2009. When I was the chairman of public accounts in 2009, we were able to find a syndicate where the minister, and I hope nobody will blame me that the minister at that time was the deputy president, William Ruto, where the minister, with a group of business people and politicians, had created briefcase millers. So what would happen is that the briefcase miller, who sometimes would be a member of parliament, would go and be given a permit for 100 bags of maize, for example. Okay, no, I mean 100 bags of maize. And now, because the miller has no maize to mill, he's at the mercy of this politician who has the permit. So the politician then sells the permit to the miller at a profit. So the politicians made a kill. So to me, what's happening now is an artificial shortage of maize. And briefcase millers now will be selling those permits to the millers and making a kill. This back and forth of saying maize is from Mexico, now from South Africa, and now it has taken 4 days, now it should have taken a longer time. It's just meant to confuse all of us so that they can achieve what they want to achieve, i.e. raising money for campaigns using the maize crisis. Yeah.
All right, so the fact that it was first of all in Mexico, now it's being stashed away in South Africa, how does it also violate the international trade? I mean, how does it really work? Can you just buy from Mexico, then you have it shipped in South Africa? Because also that will attract import duty to other countries.
It doesn't affect international trade because there is no trade, there's no movement of maize taking place. It will only affect the international trade.
We are riding on the assumption, yes, there was movement of maize from South Africa, from Mexico to South Africa.
It has only become South Africa to Kenya after the public put pressure. Otherwise, until yesterday, it was from Mexico to Kenya. Yeah? I mean, you should have seen what was trending on social media that put the deputy president saying, I didn't say Mexico. I said maize eco.
Maize eco.
Maize eco.
All right, let's hear from Miguna Miguna. Do you hold with the truth?
Debarl, first of all, I have to say that the main issue here, first of all, is high commodity prices and absence of food for the average citizen.
Yes.
It's not just maize.
Yes.
The average citizen cannot afford food.
Yes.
And they cannot afford food because, number one, they are unemployed. Number two, they are poor. And they are poor because of poor economic policies and programs for job creation and infrastructure development. So that we have to deal with. Two, when you say the government, there is no government, the government. We have two levels of government, the national government and the county governments. And agriculture is a county government responsibility.
Yes.
You see, that's why I always have problems with the way things are simplified. If the counties are responsible for agriculture, which is food and food security, why would we, including the media, absolve them from responsibility? And I've seen even the governor of Nairobi saying, you know, the national government do this and that. What are you doing as the governor of Nairobi to secure food security for the people of Nairobi, for example? So that's number two. Number three, so there is divided responsibility. We can't just blame the national government alone in context and fairness. Number three, it is speculative, I think, to say without evidence that because the maize arrived yesterday, it is as a result of one or two when we have no evidence. I would like to see the evidence. Yes, it is suspicious, and yes, it looks like corruption, but I would like to speak about facts of corruption so that we can call for the people who are responsible to be brought to account. But when we just speak generally, and it's like we are wailing, that's not a very disciplined discourse. And I would like to engage in a disciplined discourse. So this one, I would like to know who imported the maize, how are these importers connected to the governments, whether the national or the county governments, how has that impacted on the price of food, and what do we do about that? That to me is a more rational discussion. But at the end of the day, yes, there is a lot of poverty. Yes, there is a lot of high commodity prices, and these have to go down so that the citizens can get relief. But they're not going to get relief in the long term if there is no employment, and if corruption is not reduced, and if inflation is not put under control. But you're not going to do that by wailing.
All right. Let's hear from Joshua Kiptoo.
Now, I think there was a time an ad hoc formula was established when it comes to trying to establish the intrigues of government procurement and tendering, that there is a way you can know a particular project is bungled or has something stinking about it. And for the maize issue, Miguna has captured well the background of the problem, but I would also say there's the second element of it. How do we deal with the problem? The long-term bit of it is the policy. What have the county governments done? What has the national government done on the same? But as at moment, the main issue is, was the project or was the maize buying handled well? Everything looks fishy. There's something about facts and truth. Truth always remains the same. It's constant. And even if you look at how, when it comes to management of information, you can only be sound and secure if you have a consistent line, and you can only have a consistent line if it is the truth. If it is not the truth, you'll be tweaking every turn, every moment. The more the questions are raised, the more trouble you will be trying to find the answers. For example, if 1 week ago you'd think that you are getting the maize from Mexico, if, for example, the government was opening up the floodgates for the maize to come in and it is said to come from Mexico, in your mind would that be timely enough? So as to how they delivered within a short time, and at the first instance, the narrative was simple. We are buying the maize from Mexico. We are lucky to have them. I got a bit concerned when last week I read Mexico itself complaining that they may not satisfy their usual supply chain, because Mexico is a major producer of white maize, because America or the US produces corn, but Mexico produces the white maize. So when I read last week, and I was just going through their database, they are claiming themselves that they'll have a problem. So that was the first liner that I thought, okay, this looks a bit suspicious. Secondly, when the government was pressed this week to come out clean, and they then, I think the last 2 days is when they came out and said, no, the maize is just from South Africa. So that tells you something. The kind of trajectory and the manner of the information tells you something is not right about it. And the way the answers are coming, they're not forthcoming. The government, again, does not help itself. One, they don't want to own fully the repercussions of if anything goes bad, they don't want to own. But the fact that the cabinet secretary was there to receive the maize consignment puts them again into the plot, into the fix. So based on how things are done in Kenya, you can always smell something is wrong by just looking at the inconsistencies. There are so many inconsistencies. And again, that now gives rise to questions. And the questions would be, does it mean that the maize crisis was forthcoming? Did someone somewhere knew that there would be this shortage, and out of this shortage, one can profiteer out of it? Our economic system, as the former CJ says, it is a bandit economy. It's a fact. You never rule out that. A capitalist will look at an opportunity. The only problem is an opportunity created at the expense of the suffering of the people for a few to profiteer?
Yes.
That is the main question we should have. And that is why I can say I don't have full information, but the thing plays out. There's something beautiful about truth. It always comes out. Within the next 1 week, every single bit will come out. But as it stands right now, so many unanswered questions as to how that thing was done.
Yeah, and we're eagerly waiting to, yes, they normally say the truth will out at some point. But don't you find it also consternating that the Mexican embassy here in the country cannot confirm that the maize came from Mexico?
But that was a spin by the government. I don't think it was government to government. It was a spin. What I can credit Jubilee for, they are very good in PR and information. They are super in that. The only problem, the PR...
What is the spin? The fact that
the spin was that we already have an agreement with Mexico government. You are getting the maize from Mexico government, but that is not true. It's not from Mexico government. In fact, to be specific, that thing, in fact, the ship was from South Africa. And if indeed it came from Mexico as the originator, it's not 2 weeks ago or a week ago, it's something like 3 months ago. So I think the first information that came out from, I think, the press secretary to the president, it was more or less, they wanted to portray that the government has moved in quickly. We have negotiated with another government, which is not the case right now. And you can see how everyone is walking back quickly. Yesterday, the CS Agriculture was supposed to give a press conference. They quickly called it off. And I think today, maybe the Jubilee leadership would answer to the same. So they're walking back quickly away from that.
Well, Senator Wamatangi, don't you find it also consternating that the government is speaking from both sides of the mouth when it comes to this issue?
Well, first, probably the important thing is to establish what mischief or crime or misdeed are we trying to establish here in the entire process. The first thing that I want to say is that it's a reality. Let's first deal with the reality. The reality is that we've just come out of a drought. The reality also is that through our TV screens and all the news media in this country, for the last 2 weeks, we've been showing how Kenyans have been going to the supermarkets. You can find maize flour. They couldn't have their main staple food, which is ugali and githeri, as it is, because there's no maize. And the first thing we would need to establish, because that's a reality we come from drought. We also know that there's been a shortage. The first thing then to establish would be, is this a real shortage or an artificial shortage?
That's a question we ask.
And fine, from what we saw, the first thing then you need also to establish is, are there reserves either held in the strategic reserve that have not been released for importation to happen? In the absence of, for example, the media or anyone else trying to pursue this, first establishing those facts, and with the reality that this has been a long, prolonged drought, then would be trying to establish a mischief or a misdeed that we cannot hold truth to. But let's deal with then the other facts that you've asked about. Could this maize be from Mexico, or is it possible somebody is playing mischief? And I want to say, because I'm a businessman and I know some of these things, how they happen. First, the fact that either the ship arrived in 7 days or 5 days or 10 days, I would tell you as a businessman, really, that's neither here nor there. Because I would give you an example. For example, like in a country like Singapore, in countries like most of the Arabian countries, there is business that they call shoring. And if you go to those countries, the economies are sustained by that business, where you find there are thousands of ships packed with all commodities just hovering around shores in the high seas, waiting to establish where is there a shortage of oil or of this kind of petroleum or this kind of commodity, including cereals. That kind of business happens, and this does not happen, of course, government to government. It happens in the private sector, such that for those people, you know, it's like trading shares. Once you establish that there's a shortage there, businessmen quickly jump in. You go to those guys, buy. Sometimes you have to change documents, you know, from this consignee to another consignee, reroute the ship, and you go and sell. I mean, that's in the private sector. So in as far as whether and let's also remember that one of the great maize exporters in Africa is also Malawi, which is really just down South Africa. So as far as maybe that area is concerned, the fact that the ship could have arrived fast in 3 or 4 or 5 days is not supposed to be really a big mystery. But the issue here would be, if you ask me then, because I think one of my colleagues said here, why was the CS present? And to me, it would make sense. A lot of sense, because this is a national calamity, and it is in the interest of government, whether national or county, to see that this problem is resolved and people are able to put food on their table and not suffer. And so whether a reprieve comes from this importation done by the mailers or a group of businessmen or whoever has imported, as long as that commodity has come, port charges for that commodity are paid, tests are run on that maize so that we don't have another problem like we had last time of aflatoxins and so on, and contaminated maize, you remember, that we had, and I'm sure Boni Khalwale can tell us a lot more about the toxic maize. I'm sure it was a big story with some of your colleagues in NASA. Then if the food is good for human consumption, we can then say the CS would have to be there. Why wouldn't he be there to ensure that when Kenyans are suffering, he's put his best foot forward to ensure that this shortage has been alleviated?
Don't you think also there's a mismatch between the government and also the private sector? Because first of all, it is not within the remit of the government to receive what the private sector is doing, right? First of all, it shows actually weakness or poor planning from the government that even the private sector will be importing maize, while this should be the function of the government. The National Strategic Reserve right now does not have enough maize flour to feed the country.
Remember that the remedy that government, or the incentive that government is supposed to give to step in to deal with such a problem or such a calamity is by providing the duty-free facility for importers, not for government, for importers, for millers, to import these commodities so that it can be quick, it can be fast, it can be incentivizing. But it's not to deal with the problem. You cannot claim that the government should be a standby in this scenario. They're supposed to be involved in ensuring that the problem is resolved.
Thank you, Boni.
For purposes of this particular interview, I think Kenyans would be happy to hear what a responsible government would have done under the new constitution. There are 3 functions at play in this particular issue. The first one is the function of agriculture, the second one is the function of disaster management, and the third one is the issue of regulation of trade. I would like the public to know that both the function of agriculture and regulation of trade under the constitution is domiciled in the county government. The only entry in this particular issue by the national government was management of the disaster of shortage of food. So a responsible government respecting this constitution would have required that President Uhuru then immediately convenes a meeting of the summit. The summit is a meeting where the president meets the 47 governors and then they discuss issues. The president would then have talked at the summit with the governors, and they would have created a way forward involving both the short-term and the long-term solution to the looming crisis of food shortage. The fact that this matter was triggered by one individual at the Kenya Revenue Authority on 4th of May, when they issued a gazette notice that maize should be imported. Both, by the way, white maize, good for human consumption, and yellow maize. Go and read that the gazette notice. Yellow maize for animal consumption. This was an individual who was being remote controlled with a view of allowing the people that you have said hover around the high seas with maize and other sorts of trade to make a kill. We are waiting to hear the president issue a statement on the genesis of this and the chairman of the Council of Governors. Their silence is too loud and it is not acceptable. I am hoping that the Speaker of the Senate, together with the leader of the majority and the minority, will urgently reconvene Senate so that the Senate can speak to this very important issue.
All right. You allude to the fact that, of course, this is also the county government's
and that is what Boni is talking about.
They'll come to the fore and say right now they have a crisis because of finances, which is not trickling down to the counties as well.
No.
We have the appropriation of bill which has sailed through, and the division of revenue. There's that debate that is ongoing right now, and as we speak, the counties there in a crisis. They do not have finances, and I think the senators can tell us.
Debarl, that is passing the buck. Boni is exactly right. This is the kind of disciplined discussion that I was calling for.
But
Boni, no, but let me answer you. The money is there. The money is there. The budgets were passed. The money was delivered. Even the doctors, the payment of doctors, for example, the money was already delivered. The governors have just refused to pay the doctors, which is completely abominable. It's criminal because somebody has taken public resources, put it probably in fixed deposit accounts, or is trading with it in New York, and will now come back after 1 year without any scrutiny. So Boni is right. If this was a properly governed society, the president would never have traveled to the UK.
Never.
He would never have traveled to China. This is an emergency. And the governors would not be trying to pass the buck by giving contradictory and blaming the national government when agriculture and food security is precisely their domain.
Exactly.
There is absolutely no question about it. The media continue to talk about the government, shift the blame to the national government and leave the governors. We cannot leave them there sitting pretty. This should have been a summit, an emergency summit, like Honorable Boni Khalwale is saying, and they would have come up with not just short-term, but also long-term policy on food security. For example, Kenya is known to be an agricultural country.
Yes.
It's not a question of drought.
Yes.
Because as I said during my previous appearance,
yes,
UNESCO has said Kenya has rain that is capable of taking care of 233 million people, the population of the United States of America. So we have more than enough rain. The drought notwithstanding, this rain could have been harvested and irrigation could have been done and we would have had enough food. We do not have enough food because of poor leadership, poor policy, and of course, corruption. And so coming to the issue now of the maize and the fact that the minister went to receive the maize and whatnot, I disagree with Honorable Wamatangi. It's not the responsibility of government to be monitoring the high seas to see who has maize and who doesn't. The government, if there is emergency, can bring food for its own people. That's why there is a national
strategic reserve.
Strategic reserve.
Yes.
Yes.
The tap.
That is not for the private sector. And we cannot have a government that feeds speculators in the high seas that are trying to make a kill, so that there is a shortage that could have been foreseen, because a country does not run on autopilot. You cannot wake up one day and just realize, oh, we don't have enough maize. These are things you can foresee 1 year in advance. You know there would be poor rains. You know it would affect, say, for example, the production of maize. Therefore, you plan ahead. So, right now, we want to know when the government knew, for example, the national and county government knew that there was shortage of maize. 2, what did they do about it?
This morning. Let's continue. Probing questions that we have on the front page of a Standard.
We're here.
We didn't finish.
Yes, I remember. We were coming to Kiptoo. So before we took a short break, you had it also on your tongue to say something.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to contribute on the issue of the maize scandal, and I was just picking up the story that you just ran through about our SGR going to 50,000 that can last half a day.
Yes.
Now, that is the tragedy. And
the strategic reserve.
Yes, if the SGR can have 50,000 for a country like Kenya that has been independent for 50 years, that is a tragedy. Let me pick it this way. This is where we always get it wrong. And this is why, as an academic, I feel for the last 3-4 years, we've been vilifying the power of knowledge and the power of policy. It's a simple case of policy failure, both at the national and the county government. Last I checked, I thought food security is the most serious security issue or risk in any country in the world. It is the most dangerous. If, for example, right now the country goes hungry, it is the most dangerous. That one can fathom a revolution so easily. In what way? How did we get here? We've had a government for the last 5 years, and if I remember, the Jubilee government came in strongly on the basis that we'll have cheaper food, we'll have a manageable cost of living. So how did we get there where we have a case whereby the SGR has 50,000? Do you want to say for the 3-4 years, or even last year, we hadn't foreseen this? To be specific, yes. The government last year allowed exports of maize. Why did we export maize if this could be seen happening? Do you want to say, for example, the meteorological department didn't give the warning that we may have this drought to the extent that the country can prepare? So I feel that shows you the national government has a simple failure, which I call policy incoherence and indiscipline, in the sense that if we cannot plan, then why are we getting surprised with the results we have? If our SGR can fall to that level, that tells you someone somewhere sat and never bothered to give a projection. In fact, we have the National Intelligence Service, we have the government agencies. Their role is always to give this. In fact, the difference between a common citizen like me and a government is that the government is ahead of time. They can know the 1 year, the 2 years ahead what is likely to happen. So that tells you there was no foresight, there was no anticipation. And to be specific, part of the policy failures are now coming to fruition. In 2013, or even going back to 2010, the idea of irrigation was meant to curtail this kind of problem. Our over-reliance on rain-fed agriculture, the idea of this project of Galana, which has become a stinking thing. You can't even talk about it. How did we not achieve that? We have a ministry. In fact, at the moment, we have a ministry of irrigation. What is it doing? How are we unable to produce? Malawi is smaller than us, smaller economy than us. How do they export maize? That is an absurdity. Now, coming to the county government, that's another disaster.
Yes.
Devolution was meant to shoulder responsibility. The county governments were meant to guarantee food security. And I was just sharing with my two senior friends here that I can speak from where I come from. I'm privileged to have a parent who was, or who is an agriculture officer, almost going to retirement. And for the last 4 years, they have been idle. The moment the national government handed them over to the county government, nothing happens. Their role was extension services. It's not even just about money. It's about the policy. Extension officers are meant to try, they are the pulse of the government, of the county governments. They are meant to train farmers. They are meant to equip farmers. What happened to them? If the county government abandon extension services, then how do you expect to have such thing like food security? You can't have that. So I feel the county government got the responsibility, are still crying foul about the money, but they failed to implement policies. In fact, most of those policies that used to be done by the national governments are obsolete. If you go into the county, and even the Muranga governor made it clear that the failure is on us as governors. We need to come up and explain to the country how, as county government, we never saw it coming, we never equipped our farmers, we never educated the farmers. In fact, I remember most county governments were heavy on promises in 2013, saying they are going to buy tractors, they are going to do extension. In fact, they were promising that within 1 year, there will be a bumper harvest that has never been seen before. So what has happened? What changed? So it is a simple case that in both levels of government, there is a simple case of policy incoherence as to how government entities, both from government or from the national to the county, are unable to foresee this, then why do we have them in office? Why do we have these entities?
Right.
Why do we have these offices? We can't see this coming. So I think as a country, it is a time to interrogate the policies of these aspirants. I want us to be more particular to the county governments, because in the next 5 years, they'll be having the same instruments. Can they undo the damage of these first county governments in the sense that put more money, put resource, put more focus in agriculture? Kenya is 70% reliant on agriculture. What is so difficult? And it's not even about money, it's about policies. Keep putting money where the policy can give returns. Simple.
Thank you. And I think also we should be asking probing questions on why we're having these institutions in the first place. Do we need all these institutions? Because first of all, if you look at the water bodies that we have, around 12 of them, right, in this country. And yet we know Kenya is started to be one of the countries that is bound to be water scarce.
Insecure.
The water scarcity in the country for the next, I don't know how many years, right? We need to ask another probing question. The Nairobi or the National Irrigation Board,
yes,
what is it doing to make sure that we have places in this country that, you know, maybe they have arable land, and yet we don't have any projects that is ongoing to make sure also these places are irrigated in the first place? Could we ask probing questions also on why the Senate, and I think this particular bill that came from Senator Boni Khalwale, the food security bill, was passed through Senate, is being held in Parliament right now, and I think she proposes in the bill that we should have a food secretariat, food security secretariat, that will collapse all this body and come under the remit of the food secretariat, food security secretariat. I think it's a laudable, it's such a laudable bill that should come to.
That's another institution that has failed.
We create another, but we collapse all this because all of them, it seems, they're not really functioning.
We are good at creating, but do they work? Do they follow? In fact, do we follow through and ask what these guys are doing? For example, how can, for example, the NCPB chair come on board and tell the country 50,000 bags? Since when? So does it mean if today a civil law breaks out, we are in trouble? Because if we don't have food, what happens?
So these are the questions we should be probing to this, we should be asking to actually these officers. First of all, why are they getting taxpayers' money, yet they're not delivering?
I think you're on him.
Yeah.
Right, let's go to Senator Wamatangi. Why are they delivering?
I was saying like you didn't want to hear my opinion.
No, I was coming to you.
Okay, fine, thank you. I first want to agree quite a lot with some of the things said by my friend here, Wakili. You know, on the fact that there should be continuous, very vigilant and ongoing improvement. One on policy and interaction between the two levels of government. You know, development of a proper policy that will ensure that we don't face this kind of calamity another time, or when it does come, then it is mitigated in a better way. You know, that definitely must be the remit and mandate of any government. But then also to say that you know, when government is planning, it does not plan on how to create calamities or how calamities will be made. For example, I mean, part of government planning is not planning on drought, but how to mitigate. You know, let me remind my colleagues and ourselves of, remember, during the last years of President Bush in the United States, there was a time there was a major calamity in, I think that was in New Orleans, when the city was almost half submerged by a hurricane. And the debate that ensued after that tragedy is similar to what we are saying today. And yes, there were faults and failures, but the fact is that the calamity came in spite of all the technological advancement of the US government and any other governments on predicting when there will be massive rainfall or such. It did come. That's why they're called tragedies. Now, the drought that we are now talking about and the effects of it later, that's what we should be addressing. And I want to say one or two things, because it is important that we know that what we should be addressing then now is the way forward. And that's why I said I agree with him. I think one of the questions we'll be asking, for example, is now that this maize has been imported, because, see, we also must speak truthfully. And that's what Boni started with. I wish he would also emphasize that truth when he was speaking about when he was chairman of public accounts. And how licenses to import were being given to millers. The policy of government is that those that are licensed to import maize are traders, not government. That's first. Secondly, then what we'd be asking is, when this maize has been brought in, what prices are going to be pegged on that maize, on the flour produced from it, such that we would then speak firmly and boldly if exploitation was seen as to be the end because of the prices that will be put on that maize. But let me also answer my friend Miguna, because he said that at a time like this, the president should not have been in the UK or in China.
Oh, yes.
And you know, I tell you, one, you need to understand that the president runs a government with a whole system and structure that works, and is capable of mitigating and dealing with circumstances even in his absence. And two, it's also important to note that he was not on holiday. He was still in national public duty to deal with other national matters of importance. So you know, that argument is neither here nor there. The deal should be, or the question should be, is what is supposed to be done by government to mitigate this being done? And I would want to ask, for example, the media. Has the media taken time, for example, to go to the storage houses of National Cereals and Produce Board, see whether are there still reserves that are being kept there?
Of course.
And lastly,
that's what we have from the
lastly, probably what we would also be asking is, when you're asking these questions, in this course of planning, and if we would be seeing any mischief, do we think, or are there any, for example, any farmers in Kenya who are complaining that we had our maize which was not bought and stored? The fact is, and we have to be honest in this discourse, so that Kenyans can be able to know that as leaders we also take responsibility when such disaster strikes. You see, we had a drought, it was prolonged, and so here we are finding ourselves having consumed what we have. And now, as leaders, we should be responsible enough to say these are the solutions. And so, whether it is businessmen who bring in, because even as we discuss on this issue of where did the maize come from, how did it come so fast, like I've said, unless the price is hourly, unless it is overpriced, and this concept that Boni spoke about, that government should not just be there to aid brokers or businessmen in high seas. You know, just for information, and maybe we could have viewers who are watching, who are also business people. You know, nowadays in international trade, storage of commodities moved from warehouses on land, for your information. If you go into the international, there are people who have built massive containers and ships in the high seas that they use specifically for storage, not even for speculation. You build floating warehouses all over the world, which are in mobile vessels, and you store commodities. And you know the purpose of that business and how it works. I said this is just for information. I'm a businessman, so I know. That question that you raised about how did it take so long, that is the center of that business. That is how it survives. Because you buy commodities, bring them to the middle ground in the high seas, store them there, and be at a vantage point. So if you hear that there is an issue on that end, then you can move within that cut time. So that's how, just to clear that question of,
thank you.
Is it mischief that a commodity can arrive that fast? Those are the facts of the international trade. But like I've said, as leaders, what we need to be saying is, are we standing in front of the problem and our people and saying that these are the solutions we bring to you at a time like this, when we have to face a natural calamity like we did last time.
Wamatangi, let me tell you. The reason why the CS bet left his urgent work in Nairobi and went to receive that maize, it is because he was going to protect his interest or the interest of his bosses.
Well, that's speculative. That is speculative. It's not a matter of fact.
You have a weird character of not listening when it becomes hot.
Please proceed.
Yeah. So that is confirmation, Senator, that he was going to protect an interest. Let me tell you, even a simple farmer in Nandi, if he has bought a cow and that cow is arriving in the home, the farmer goes to see his cow to be sure that my good cow, which I have bought, has arrived. So Bet was going to witness for himself his maize, their maize having arrived. Remember, he is a CS, a public servant, and the maize was private dealership. Secondly, less than 5 weeks ago, the National Assembly passed budget. And at that time, the need for drought mitigation was already evident. So if it was the intention of the government that they use intervention of purchase of maize so as to stock the strategic food reserve, they would have factored it into that budget. The fact that they refused to factor it into that budget is because they wanted to create this loophole.
No, but the government does not buy maize.
Let him finish. Just let him finish.
They wanted to create this loophole so as to do exactly what is happening now. I don't know why you are defending them. The people of Kiambu did not send you to the Senate to defend.
When we argue, let's argue on facts. Let's base it on truth.
Okay, I am. So, which brings me now to the more important issue in my contribution, is that food shortage, wananchi, is a greater threat to national security than even terrorism. Because terrorism can strike in one place, in Peketoni, in Mandera, in Wajir. But food shortage strikes everywhere. It is a greater threat to national security. And therefore, I am really disappointed with the following governors. The governor of Bungoma, the governor of Uasin Gishu, the governor of Nandi, the governor of Kakamega, and the governor of Trans Nzoia. These are the people in charge of counties that produce maize and other cereals. Mm-hmm. What have they done over the last 4 years to improve the production of cereals? Somebody should actually be pinning these people down. The state machinery should now move, and because it is too late for us to cry, they should move, and in accordance with the Constitution, which provides that the national government is responsible for agricultural policy, the national government should, with speed, graft a county-specific agricultural policy for all the 47 counties, so that now the Senate, and to a small extent, the county assemblies, can have an instrument that they can use to oversight the county governments in terms of how they are performing so as to move most of our counties from consumer economy to producer economy in the agricultural sector.
Thank you. Miguna Miguna.
Debarl, I agree with most of what my friend Boni Khalwale and Joshua said. We have to underline this. Food security has nothing to do with weather. It has nothing to do with drought. It has nothing to do with actual production of maize even. That is my only quibble with my friend. Israel does not produce maize, does not produce rice, does not produce most of the foodstuffs that it uses to feed its people. Nor does Namibia or Egypt or Japan, but there's food secure. In the world today, everybody knows that if you go to the supermarket today, and if you go to most households today, the people that are suffering are the poor. The rich have enough food because they can buy them. So, which means that it has everything to do with poverty and planning. Now, if you are not producing food, then you import food. So which means that economically, you plan on the importations and storage cycle. So you know and you foresee when you're not going to have enough food. For example, the residents of Nairobi, cannot pass the blame to Washingishu or Kakamega or Busia or wherever that these people did not produce food. Because you're a governor, you control 50% of the GDP. You could have imported food for your own people. You did not. So the second thing, you raised the issue of institutions.
Yes.
And the fact that Senator Elachi nominated is suggesting the formation of another. We don't want formations of more institutions. The ones that are there are not working because the people that are responsible for them are incompetent or compromised. It is not lack of institutions. It is not lack of policies. It's not even lack of laws. It is the fact that the people that are supposed to implement these laws are not doing so. I have issue, and I am a bit surprised because Senator Wamatangi is a very intelligent man and quite eloquent and very consistent. I'm impressed by his contributions at the Senate because the two of them, Senator Khalwale and Wamatangi, have done quite a good job in terms of making oversight work. But when he gives examples that don't even help his party and does not help the government he purports to support, I'm a bit puzzled. He says, he gives the example of Bush's handling of Louisiana, particularly New Orleans hurricane. And you know, that is what brought the Republicans down and made sure that Obama won the election. So, I mean, that was mishandled very badly. And they suffered the consequences of that in the following election. So he gives very bad example that is not going to help Jubilee in its next election. So I have great issue with that. Then, let me finish. So I'm saying that is a very bad example that if you are defending a government, you don't give.
I'll correct you.
It's like giving Hitler as an example of popularity. The way I've seen Sonko supporters give him, which is equivalent to Hitler, raising a demagogue to a level when, you know, it's not going to be sustainable. But moving very quickly, then he says, he gives another example that does not help President Uhuru Kenyatta and Jubilee. Then he says, the president doesn't have to be here. When there are emergencies, there is something called symbolism and optics. Politics is about symbolism and optics. Leadership, visionary leadership, is about taking responsibility yourself and being seen to be concerned about the national interest. If this was the United States of America, or it was any country in Europe, the president would never travel. Even if there was a tragedy of 10 people dying on a road, like they have been dying in carnages day after day, the president would return immediately. They would cut short their trips to go back and be there with the people. It is very important for the people to see their president concerned about food prices, concerned about inflation, concerned about poverty and starvation, and that they see the commander-in-chief marshalling all the resources to deal with that.
All right.
So I think, Senator Wamatangi,
because
help your party
can I just
if
answer
you are
him on that
campaigning
one?
for them.
Just very quickly, on that one, just that last one, very briefly. Yes, very briefly, because you see, you know, Miguna, you know, we must belong to two different schools of thought, because you belong to that school of thought that believes that for things to be seen to be working, you must be there showing like things are working. But I'll tell you what our difference is. Our difference in thought and in deed is we believe in setting systems and structures that work and work for real.
They don't work.
And see, when you talk about symbolism, and my friend, you see, that is the problem.
You're going to lose this election
because you said you came in as an independent, and I thought that you are losing the truth of NASA and
I'm very independent.
I hope because but you still have the hangover of it. You know, when you talk about show off. about creating a facade that this is going to be like, and we are here leading at them, and you know that behind you, systems are not working. You know how it works, and ask, for example, these guys here in Nation Media. I mean, you set a system that makes sure that a paper rolls out in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Burundi, in wherever. That's called saving systems, my friend. And then lastly, when you say that, giving the example of Louisiana, I made a very, very simple case and said that government does not sit on a table to plan the calamity to happen, but how to mitigate it. The fact whether Bush effectively mitigated his is not an issue.
All right, just one line,
just 1 minute.
From our viewers.
Just 1 minute. You see, Senator Wamatangi, if the Aga Khan came here at the Nation House, you will see the difference. This room where we are sitting will be neater than it is now.
That's right.
Everything will be moving and people will be running like crazy. The same way, no, just listen. The same way, if President Uhuru Kenyatta came and called his ministers to a meeting, or the governors, and then issued a statement on how we are going to mitigate the food crisis, you will see things happening. My friend, the presence of a leader cannot be underestimated. So essentially what I'm saying is this. The bully pulpit of a commander-in-chief when he addresses the nation cannot be underestimated.
Absolutely.
And all I'm saying,
you cannot underestimate it, but you cannot make a case to say that you have to be there. No.
You're not just seeing it.
No, my friend.
All I'm saying,
you cannot argue that the Aga Khan has got to be standing here for this show to continue. He's even never been here in the show.
No,
and
fine,
we ran it
fine.
every Tuesday.
Okay.
You made your point.
Right.
My point is this.
Yes.
Institutions are created, yes. Policies are conceived and conceptualized and then implemented, yes.
Thank you.
But the commander-in-chief is the one that is in charge and coordinates everything.
Absolutely.
And we need him here now.
He needs to be
Yes.
there.
Thank you. We need to also to hear
his
what they're
physical
saying
presence can
on social
only
media. Thank you,
occasionally be
Wamatangi.
necessary. Not all the time.
On Have You Say, and we have Usha standing by to give us that particular same.
Right, so it seems just like yesterday's topic, today is one that has also garnered a lot of your attention, as indeed it should. Ugali is something that needs to be on our plate. So straight to it, the question was, do you think the government is being economical with the truth on maize imports? And we have James Opere, who says there is no truth in Jubilee administration. We are waiting for Chief Investigator, Honorable Raila, to open the can of worms. Maybe our maize was passed through Tanzania and then back to Mombasa, not a surprise. We have David Owala, who says it's so sad that the people who voted for this government are the same people dying of hunger in the country and spending too much on unga, milk and sugar, yet our country used to export the same commodities to other countries. We also have Evans, who says no, not at all. I think there is something fishy going on. First, they lied that the maize will be supplied by Mexico, and now I don't think the maize is being imported as they claim. It is our locally produced maize which was being hidden by the cartels. We also have Matthew, who says, what is the issue? Maize or where it came from? If it is fit for human consumption or not should be the issue. Moving on to Twitter, we have Ernest, who says 60% of Kenyans are happy to criticize the government instead of finding solutions to the problems. We also have Marcos, who says the PS is making it sound like the ship was hawking maize in the Indian Ocean before Kenya expressed interest. We have Michael, who says Kenyans are never fools. This is mischief that Kenyans will punish on the 8th of August. We also have George, who says Kenya needs maize, period. Where it came from is a non-issue. You were the one complaining about lack of unga. What now? We also have Omulo, who says these agricultural agencies, just like many others, are cash cows, private businesses for people in government. And finally, we have John Githanga, who says the Jubilee administration has been doing things topsy-turvy. Things that were to be done first are being done last, and vice versa. So as you can see, a lot of mixed reactions. Some people seem to think we are focusing on the wrong thing as long as the maize is here, and others want answers as to why there's so much confusion as to how it came into the country. But do keep the conversation going. AM Live NTV is our profile name. That's on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Back to you, Debarl.